Hello, guys, and welcome to the Legendary Ladies podcast. And today we are doing a review discussion on The Bride of Chucky. And if you guys are watching in video, you see that there is not a lady on this
Not today.
and that's Phil. Phil's been on the podcast before. Amy was going to be on the podcast, but she has a very busy week. But it's funny because I feel like she'd be very interested in how. I don't know if she'd love or hate this movie, but Phil, you love Chucky, so that's why we invited you to be on this podcast.
Absolutely. I love Chucky. I have my Bride of Chucky shirt on.
Ooh.
Oh,
Didn't
amazing.
Dan give you that? Oh,
I've got
I
my
give you
good
that.
guy. I've got
Good
my
guys.
good guy hat.
Good guy
And
hat.
I've got Glenn.
Oh God, Glenn. I
We're watching
forgot
on
about
video.
Glenn. I want you to know, Phil, that I took this podcast very seriously, and I was like, I can't just jump in at Bride of Chucky. How will I understand the complicated backstory? So I did watch Child's Play this week, so that I was like, okay, at least I got the first one in the series, and then the restart in the 90s.
I'm very excited to hear your thoughts on both of them because they're such different movies, and
they're very different tonally.
It's one of the things I love about the Chucky Child's Play franchise. They don't like doing the same thing twice, so they reinvent themselves every few years, and I think it's really fun talking about different movies, especially in comparison to each other. So
and they have a TV show.
And the TV show.
I hear the TV show is good, but I have not watched it.
I love the TV show. It actually just came back for its third season yesterday, so I was watching it today.
So I was on Peacock trying to find Bride of Chucky, and the first thing that popped up to me on Peacock was like, do you want to watch Chucky, this TV show? And I clicked in to be like, okay, how many episodes is this show? And the first episode from the third season, it looked like they were in the Oval Office, and I was like, what has this show become? Like,
what
is it, the West Wing, but with Chucky?
They love taking Chucky to different places. They take him. You saw that we had a road trip movie that we're talking about today with Bride. He's been to military academies, insane asylums, haunted houses, the Oval Office, a Catholic school. They do good playing with their
Chucky
settings.
loves to travel.
He does. And you know what's so funny about Chucky is that as you know, Morgan, I do like slasher films. I enjoy them. I've seen a lot of them. But Chucky's never been on my radar. My friend Luke, he got me into a lot of horror movies, and I don't think he ever was a Chucky fan. But ever since my first day of friendship with Phil, I feel like I probably have talked about Chucky with him. And there's times where we're sitting at cons, he's giving me all the lore, and I kind of grasped some of it. And then him and his sister would always say this joke of what's the line?
Rude fucking doll.
And they would say it all the time where I'm like, what are you talking about?
Now you saw the movie.
And now you show me the clip like 10,000 times after I asked, like, what are you talking about? And then they showed me and I was like, oh, that's interesting. He must be like, in my mind, this guy's this main character. He's like one of the big bad villains. And I watched it. I'm like, he's in it for 2 seconds.
That's what makes it funnier. It didn't need to be there, but it was just for context for anyone who hasn't seen the movie. There's a scene where Chucky is just crawling from point A to point B, and a stoner sees him, and Chucky flips him the bird, and this one-off random stoner character just says "rude fucking doll." And it's so funny.
It's so funny that you guys pointed that out because that was one of my biggest laughs in the whole movie. Just like it just comes out of nowhere. It's like so unexpected. He's just like so offended that the doll flipped him off instead of that there's like a doll that's moving on its own.
No, he didn't care about that. And what's also interesting about this movie because we were trying to decide which Chucky we're going to do for the podcast, and then I forget who you said that you probably said to Julius or Marianne, and you said like, oh, I don't know if Kat is going to like this movie. I actually think she's going to hate it. And then I watched it, and I watched this in so many bits. I did not watch this. I watched this throughout 3 days.
In true Kat fashion.
I paused it so many times, and it's only 90 minutes, but I did not watch it all the way throughout the thing. So I watched like 30 minutes of it. I'm like, no, like and this is our overall thoughts. We'll give our overall thoughts in this moment. I genuinely I liked it because it was weird, and I love a good B movie, and I'm a big Rob Zombie fan. I kind of have like memories of that, except less raunchy and sexual, but I like that it was all over the place. But I also hated this movie because of that, because there's absolutely no plot. But then I also love it because again, Katherine Heigl is this type of character. You're like, she's the final girl, and she does nothing. this whole movie. And they all kind of do nothing. And then there's a gay character, and you're like, oh, that's kind of fun, queer representation. But I'm like, is it queer representation? Like, it's such a mess, this movie, but it's also kind of fun because of.
I also love how stereotypically gay the gay character is. Like, so the gay character in the movie is trying to like pretend to be Katherine Heigl's date to like the prom or some sort of thing, and the uncle character is like quizzing him, and he's like, what are you going to study at college? And the gay character is like, theater. And then he's like, oh, but you're there on an athletic scholarship, right? Hockey. And he's like, what is it? Figure skating. And I was like, the 90s were a hell of a time, weren't they?
Chucky, first of all, love everything about that. So funny. But Chucky is a pretty queer friendly series. One of my favorite things about it. The guy who, is the brain behind Chucky, who's been, making these movies since the 80s, is a gay man. And,
Perfect,
I think obviously, well, I forget his name, Kevin, whatever his name is in Bride of Chucky, is not the best queer representation, but, I think it, I remember.
He's a main character.
He's a
main character.
I do love the level of camp in all of these movies where it's just like everything is ridiculous.
Absolutely. But it's a lot of fun, and I like to look at him as a stepping stone to some better queer representation in later Chucky that I appreciate.
Tiffany's bi.
And Tiffany is bi.
Found that out on the internet, but she's bi in the television show. You could tell us a little bit more about the bisexual Tiffany.
Chucky spoilers for everybody, but Chucky is a doll possessed by a serial killer, and Tiffany is his girl. She was his girlfriend when he was a human, and his bride when they both become dolls and get married. And Chucky's whole thing for most of the series is that he wants to be human again. He wants to possess somebody until eventually he decides, actually, I like being a doll, and doesn't want to do that anymore.
Incredible character growth.
Yeah, it takes 5 movies, but there's this wonderful scene where they spend the whole movie trying to get human hosts. Then he's like, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. And then Tiffany's like, I do. But anyway, at some point, Chucky ends up possessing a human, another human, a woman, and Tiffany and the woman become romantically entwined because Chucky is possessing her. But then Tiffany decides she likes the actual woman better and tries to get Chucky out of her. So Tiffany has a wonderful bi arc because of that.
And something that's interesting that Phil has always told me, and I find very fascinating about this franchise, is that it has continuity. Like, it doesn't like most like Halloween. They do the same story over and over again.
3 timelines.
Yeah, but this is not that, because one guy's doing it and he's just like, I really want to tell this crazy, almost fan fiction story.
That's my favorite. That's what got me into Chucky in the first place, is that I love that from 1988, when the first Child's Play came out, up through the TV show that's in its 3rd season that premiered yesterday, it's all continuous, it's all canon, with the exception of they did a reboot like a couple of years ago, but that was a different studio. That was a whole rights issue. But
interesting, because I was going to ask about that, because I did, when I was looking up Child's Play to try to watch the first one, I did see that there was another Child's Play, but from like 2019. Yeah, so that is not in continuity. Okay.
No, the studio that produced the first Child's Play still had the rights to that movie, so they made their own movie, kind of unsanctioned by the creator. So
how dare they?
It's a little controversial, but it wasn't like a bad movie, but it wasn't super well received, so it kind of got swept aside. And then the Chucky TV show came out, and everyone's like, okay, the reboot didn't happen. It's this continuous story. But the great thing about Chucky is that it started in 1988. It was Child's Play. It was a little kid gets the Chucky doll, and hijinks ensue. And the little kid actor who was 6 years old in 1988 is still playing that same character now in the TV show.
What?
25 years later, same actor.
Really? And that's so funny. And that little kid, that kid in the movie, the 88 movie, was so cute too.
He was so cute. I love how he kept fumbling his lines. So
I know. He felt like he was like a real little kid instead of like a child actor that are sometimes child actors are a little bit like winking at the camera. This kid just felt like he had wandered onto set one day.
He probably did.
He wandered on and saw a doll that he liked, and then the doll started cursing and trying to kill him. But
it's such an interesting little piece of information there. But okay, let's get back to initial thoughts. But I Phil, you've seen this a billion times. Did you get any different reaction when you watched it again recently?
it's been a while since I actually watched it all the way through, so I forgot a lot of like the jokes. So I was laughing the whole time. Julius, my partner, watched with me, and he had never seen it, so he was laughing along with me. And when we first talked about doing a Chucky movie for in October, talking about a Chucky movie, I think the original idea was like, oh, we'll watch the first one, and I was the one who was like, we got to watch Bride. And I think Chucky as a franchise, Child's Play as a franchise, has this like tendency of veering between horror and camp. And I think, Morgan, you can talk about this a little bit as well, when how different like tonally Child's Play versus Bride is. And I think I really like Bride, really stuck with me because of the left turn it had, and I think Tiffany really breathed life into the franchise. I think 3 Chucky movies in, I would say the third one is my least favorite. It's because it's starting to get a little tired, and then immediately they throw in Jennifer Tilly, and it's like, oh, okay, now this is like a new series all over again.
Now they got a little baby.
They got their little baby in one movie later, but it's
Jennifer
fun.
Tilly is also so funny too. She's got such good comedic timing.
She's
like
hysterical.
The ways that and her voice and like her physicality, she's so funny. And then like when she's the doll, it's just as funny as when she's like in person.
There's this division among the fandom where it's like, oh, do we like Tiffany as a human or a doll better? Because they're both so great. And like the TV show found the perfect balance because both are in it. Because
my God, amazing.
They go a little crazy where they're like, oh, you could split your soul into multiple bodies. So you get doll Tiffany and you get human Tiffany, which is the perfect strike. But she's great in both roles, and I just love her and Brad Dourif, who played Chucky. They play off each other so well, and it's the magic. It's the movie magic where you forget you're watching a pair of animatronic dolls the whole entire movie.
You definitely do forget.
It's funny because in the first, so I'd never seen any of the Chucky.
Yeah,
movies.
Initial thoughts on this.
Yeah, I'd never seen any of the Chucky movies, but like I've been wanting to go back and watch the horror classics. So like last Halloween, I think we did Halloween, and I was like, okay, like I gotta do Chucky's a classic. I gotta do Chucky, but I had mostly seen like the kind of messed up Brad Dourif looking Chucky. So when Child's Play started, and when I watched that before, I was shocked that the doll looked so different. Like the doll still creepy, but like not like homicidal creepy, like regular doll creepy. And I thought that was so funny how throughout Child's Play, the doll starts looking more and more like the actor.
Yeah,
if you're like, wait, what's it? Does Chucky have a receding hairline now?
He does. Yeah, his skin gets like fleshier and his hairline starts receding. It's kind of something they drop after that first movie. There's like a little of it in the second movie, but I love that about the first movie, just seeing that slow decline where it's like, oh, he looks like Brad Dourif.
Yeah, it's so funny. And he like looks less and less like a child's toy and more like something like unholy as the movie goes on. And then this one was so funny too, because Tiffany puts him back together, but she just like stapled some hair to the side of his head that you could see the whole movie.
I love that look. That's I think that's maybe the most iconic Chucky look with those stitches in the face.
So good. Yeah. I enjoyed this one overall. I thought it was really fun. It wasn't, so the first one is trying to be more like straight horror or like horror adjacent with some comedy. This one I feel like is just a comedy. Like it's scary. It's like a slasher, but it's very comedic. Like everything that the two dolls do, like when the uncle tries to plant the pot and then they smoke it in the backseat of the car. There's just nothing not funny about like two dolls smoking a joint in the backseat of a car.
And one thing I also liked about this movie again is the jokes. I wanted to see what was everyone's favorite joke. My favorite is actually one that Julius mentioned when we were driving in the car, and I was like, wait, that was like my favorite joke too, where they talk about living off of $500, and I was like,
what the lead the heroes, quote unquote, of the movie, at one point Tiffany promises $500 if they transport the dolls cross country, and the boy Jesse is like, oh, we could put a down payment on an apartment, I could put you through college. And it's just like, okay, I don't even think $500 could do this in the 60s, let alone the 90s.
I laughed so hard at that whole thing, because when I had been watching the first movie like the day before, they were talking about like, oh my God, the doll is $100. And like, I don't have that money. And I was like, what was $100 in 1988? So I was like looking at the inflation calculator. It was like 250, which is too expensive for a child's doll, honestly.
But there is a serial killer who talks.
Yeah, so I mean, so you got that little add-on, but like, even if I went on the inflation calculator, there's no way that like $500 would have done anything like what he was saying in 1998. No. I'm sorry, sir.
He was living a dream. And okay, so going back to jokes, but I also do want to talk about the characters of this movie. But is there any other jokes that you guys feel like
rude really fucking doll?
That one was so good. Yeah, that was like a show-stopping joke for me, where I just was laughing hysterically. Also, the dolls had sex. Was insane.
You got some...
and they shot it like a traditional sex scene, like between
very
humans.
Tasteful.
Very tasteful.
Very
he like unzips the back of her little doll dress, and you see it just coming over her little doll shoulders, and then the rest of it is in like shadow.
A little peek of doll ass crack as well.
Exactly, a doll butt. I was like, this is insane.
My favorite joke, aside for rude fucking doll, because that lives with me forever, is probably just the fact that Tiffany brings Chucky back with a Voodoo for Dummies book. I just... that always gets me. I just love the visual gag of her sitting. I'm wearing a shirt of the scene of her just sitting around all the candles with her Voodoo for Dummies.
That was so good.
Let's get into the characters now, because when I opened up this movie, I thought this was a made for DVD movie, if I was being honest. So I was like, oh, this is actually was released in theaters. That's interesting. And then B, wait, Katherine Heigl's in this? That's weird. John Ritter's in this? What? Like, it was just like, there's a lot of people that I didn't expect to be in this movie. And then I was like, oh, this, again, you kind of have expectations of what a horror movie is. You're just like, okay. First of all, I asked Phil, I was like, so Katherine Heigl's the final girl. She must have been in these other movies, right? She's like, no, it's like the first time she's appeared. The way they talk about her is
that was the first time she appeared? Okay, so I had assumed that she was from like the movie before, because they even make a really like strong point of mentioning that like the police officer is her uncle, because presumably her parents are dead. So I figured that like Chucky had killed them.
Mm-hmm.
I see how you could think that, but no, Chucky's the only returning character in this movie. Everyone else is completely new.
It feels like Katherine Heigl's character has like a tragic backstory that the movie is not in any way interested in getting into.
I don't think they're interested in anything about her.
That's so interesting that both of you thought that, because I watched it after having watched the other one, so I didn't think of it. I picked this because I was like, oh, it's very new watcher friendly. Chucky's the only returning character. I didn't even think like, oh, not going in, you'll think Katherine Heigl is anything more than what she was in this movie.
Because they built it that way. Whereas, and again, they're I don't know what Katherine Heigl was doing back then. I'm guessing she wasn't as big of an actress. I think Roswell was like, I don't know if this is pre-Roswell.
I think that might have been pre-Roswell. I think she was probably just about to do that.
So she's about to do Roswell, which is a show that's only me and Morgan know. And so she's about to do that.
Huge hit, obviously.
Huge hit. And it's before Grey's Anatomy, which actually was her hit, way before Grey's Anatomy. But John Ritter, he's an actor that people know. So I was just like, okay, like he must have been in this franchise for a long time. It's interesting because, again, you look at movies like Halloween, who also don't have big actors, but they became big actors because of it. So, yeah, there was a lot of things you thought they were going to play with. And then no one has a character arc. I don't even think Tiffany has a character arc. Like, they jump. So I don't actually know what this movie is about. Okay, you think there's character arcs?
I think Tiffany has a character arc. I think
what's her arc?
I think if we're getting serious for a minute, I think that she spent a decade pining after this man who never treated her right, brought him back, thought everything was going great, and then realized that it was never great, and she purposefully sabotaged them possessing the couple that was actually good for each other, quote unquote. Not that Jesse and Jade were the best couple on the planet, but I'm not saying it's the best arc on the planet, but I think she had an arc.
Okay, you know what?
No, I agree with Phil. I think I think that's what her arc was, is basically like coming into it being obsessed with Chucky and then realizing that Chucky kind of sucks.
And then she has his kid.
Well, I mean, couldn't help that at that point.
I guess so. And that happened
when you have a demon baby inside of you, you just got to shoot that thing out.
You got to shoot it out.
Shoots out.
kill some. It's funny because I was talking about like the people who survived. I was talking to Phil about this. I was like, "Oh, it's interesting because the cop survived." And he's like, "What do you mean he died?" I was like, "Oh no, we never saw his death." He's like, "Oh, it was kind of assumed that he died in the end." But I'm like, "We never saw his death." And it's like, there's a lot of people that kind of survive but then never come back. Catherine Hegel's not returning to the Chucky franchise.
Never say never. I mean, the TV show, like I said, the kid from the original movie comes back. A kid
You think
in
Catherine
the
Hegel
sequel.
is going to be
She's
like, I'm
she's
Okay,
going
not doing
on
Chucky the
a
TV
fourth
show.
Okay,
season
okay.
of
I'm not saying
Chucky.
Katherine Heigl. I'm saying maybe you'll get the boy. You'll get Jesse.
Okay, if I get the boy, I'll be happy about that.
Dead.
I want the cop and I want the love interest. Because the love interest, he was interesting. He first of all, I thought him and the gay guy had some chemistry at times. I
I
thought
like that they never made a off-color joke there. I like that
Me
he was just
too.
friends with both of them and
Yeah.
was kind of both of their confidant. I thought that was nice.
Yeah, I don't know why they're friends or how they were all friends. That was another thing that was confusing. They never go to prom.
They don't. No,
They're
I
too
thought it was
busy putting a down payment on an apartment in college and
with that $500. I thought it was funny that once after they get married and they both look like kind of miserable while they're getting married,
so
and
good.
then they're at the hotel and he gets up to go somewhere and she immediately calls the friend and is like, I think he's a murderer. And then he goes outside and he goes, I think she's a murderer. Like they both call the friend mutually to be like, I think I'm in trouble. I think I just married a murderer. Like,
I just
See,
love
I
how
actually thought that was the most concrete thread because I was just like, okay, at least he then by the end, there's like, no, these are my best friends, they're not murderers. And he's like, they're murderers. I'm like, okay, at least that was like a line. Were you gonna say, Phil?
I just like how ready they were to doubt each other the whole
yeah,
movie.
exactly. Immediately.
I thought that was very solid comedy, but also like something that Jesse and Jade aren't the most interesting characters, but I think that's
No.
something that makes them stand out a little bit is just thinking back to like the scene when they're getting married and they both just do not want to be getting married or how quickly they turn on each other. Like the second that something goes wrong when they find a body, it's like, oh, it must have been her, it must have been him.
I felt like it kind of thematically was like juxtaposing with Chucky and Tiff, where like they're also a bad couple that turns on each other at the drop of a dime when they're all in the RV and she realizes, or I can't, one of them, I think he realizes that he can turn Tiff against Chucky by making that comment about the dishes. And it starts like a whole battle between the dolls.
That's another one of my top 5 favorite jokes is when Chucky first says like, oh, the dishes aren't going to do themselves, and without missing a single beat, Tiffany just throws them against the wall. Very, very funny for me.
What do you guys think about the kill scenes? Because I actually thought they were so bad that they were good. I like that waterbed scene.
That was
insane.
insane.
It did something for me, and I really enjoyed that. And then, like, how bad the makeup was for John Ritter's death, I thought was super interesting.
The pinhead stuff that was solid. I think. Did this movie have the decapitation? Or I might be thinking of Seed.
I don't think
Chucky,
so.
I think that's the next movie. Sorry, I'm mixing up. But I think the pinhead thing is fun. I think the waterbed is probably the most talked about death. There's the goofy death when Chucky blows up the car and you see the cop like screaming when he sees it before he blows up, which is silly.
Like he could have gotten out at any point. That was my favorite part about the cop car death is that like he looks over, the car fills with smoke. He doesn't seem to think much about that. He's just going along with it. And then he looks over and there's clearly fire. And instead of ever trying to get out of the car, he just sits there and he's like, ah, and then the car
exactly. So funny.
Would you consider it a slasher movie? Because I don't know if it is or not.
I think it depends on your definition of slasher. I think Chucky in general veers between horror and comedy, and I don't think that this one's really a horror movie. I think this one's more straight comedy. So if that negates the slasher aspect, then I'll agree with you.
Well, I think a slasher is someone who goes out and wants to kill people for fun.
Then
then it's probably. I mean, if it was close to anything of like a horror subgenre, I'd have to say slasher because there's like over the top kills and you just know that like when he's picking up a knife, he's gonna go after somebody. So,
well, Final Destination a slasher? I think that's a question too because there's over the top kills there. But then I think a slasher has to do with a knife. I mean,
I think slasher implies that you need a slasher, like a lead
a one,
Well, death is a slasher, and he's in every movie.
That's true, but he doesn't have a physical form.
No, but he's mentioned a lot.
He's mentioned a lot. He's water, actually, in Final Destination. I think I would consider Chucky a slasher because if you're going the knife angle, I mean, knife is probably his most popular weapon. They get a little creative in this movie, by, like Tiffany said, bringing it into the 90s. I don't know. I have to reflect on what makes a slasher to me. But when you ask me to list my favorite slashers, I probably would say, Chucky's one of my favorite slasher villains.
Yeah, I think Chucky is at the very least slasher adjacent. I don't know what the formal definition of a slasher is, but like Chucky's got that big old knife, and
is Megan a slasher?
That's also a good question.
I think she is. I don't think she killed enough people though.
She was sort of a PG-13 slasher.
To be a slasher, you have to kill at least 6 people.
No, I think if you be a slasher, you got to kill at least 3.
Chucky definitely killed at least 3.
Yeah,
I don't think Megan did though.
No, Megan
killed the boy,
and she killed the guy who ran the company, his assistant who was trying to take over,
and the little boy in the forest,
and the neighbor, right?
And the little boy. So she killed at least 3 people, and the neighbor,
and
the dog.
I want to see Megan too. I hope we get to see that one day.
Megan versus Chucky, make it happen.
I could definitely see it. And, okay, so that's another question. We'll go back to the slasher, but what's interesting about Chucky is that there is a lot of subgenres because, again, it's a comedy, it's a horror, but then it's also, in what you said, Phil, it's the beginning of this doll genre so there's a lot of different genres within horror,
the cursed doll genre.
The cursed doll genre, but like you think cursed dolls, you think demons, which you guys know I hate the demon movies. They're not my favorite because you know why? They're boring. I always say that. I think there's too much mythology when it comes to the demon movies, and I don't like it. So any demon movie I try to skip. You got the demon movies, you got obviously the slashers, and then I'm trying to think if there's anything else in this horror.
Would you consider meta a subgenre? Because
no, because I think it usually
I'm thinking
relies
on in the woods. Because I don't know if you call that a slasher.
Oh yeah.
I think the genre of that is meta horror or just horror.
Maybe.
Comedy.
I think you have Scream. It does feel like horror comedy is kind of
Happy Death Day.
Yeah, it's kind of its own genre too at this point. Like, because I've watched a couple of horror movies that are very just like almost more funny than they are scary or horror.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Movies. Oh yeah, true. Monster movies in general. But going back to the doll thing, this was the first dolls could be creepy. That's interesting because you're relating childhood memories and nostalgia to that's weird, that's creepy. How about that kind thing became evil?
If I'm being critical of Bride of Chucky, I think that's one of the uncanny things about this movie is that it loses the child aspect. There are no child characters in this movie.
Except the teens, but they don't really relate. I don't even know. They kind of play in this limbo of I don't know how old you are.
They're like Hollywood teens because the Chucky TV show follows teens, but they're like real teens where it feels like they actually are 14, 15-year-olds. Katherine Heigl and Jesse, they feel like I don't know what they feel like 20-somethings playing teens, but Bride and Seed, the movie that follows, the only ones where Chucky doesn't really interact with any kids and doesn't really try to kill or otherwise corrupt other kids. And I think it's kind of weird having a killer doll movie that doesn't have children playing a major role. And I think in one way, that's what makes Bride kind of refreshing, especially as a 4th movie in a franchise. But another way, it makes you kind of scratch your head and you're like, something feels off here. And I think that's something you keep going back to, Kat, about the movie being a little weird and unfocused and atypical. But
also that's what makes it great.
But that's what makes it fun.
Yeah, because sometimes you watch a movie like Smile, I think is a really good example of a movie that just kind of goes to the basics of what those movies try to do, like what a jump scare movie tries to do, which is also a whole nother genre. And that's why I hated it. There was nothing special about it. Yeah. And I've seen a billion slashers, and there's a billion slashers that are kind of boring. Actually, Phil recommended what was it, Ready or Not?
Ready or Not.
And I had more fun watching this than that, which is interesting because I think Phil would have said I think you would have liked Ready or Not more because it's like this, this girl who's just trying to survive. And I was like, oh no, I enjoyed this more because I've seen Ready or Not and I've seen better versions of that movie. I was like, I've never seen this type of movie before. Nothing to compare it to.
It's almost like a buddy like travel movie. Like they're just trying to. It's like you know what, to our point of like talking about how it feels more of a comedy. I feel like I've seen this. I feel like I've seen similar movies in comedies where they're like going after one goal, but they keep on getting sidelined
Harold and
by.
Kumar.
Yeah, it's Harold and Kumar Goes to White Castle, kind of like they're trying to get to Hackensack, New Jersey, and then they keep on having wacky adventures along the way. Only their wacky adventures are like killing people in a waterbed.
Honestly, I really feel like that's the best movie to compare it to. Have you seen Harold and Kumar, Phil?
I
I feel like
haven't, no.
I was gonna say, I feel like it's a movie you haven't seen. I remember that's the type of movie, like when you were younger, when you're just switching the channels and you're like, "What's this?" And then you watch Harold and Kumar,
I
and
just
then
never came across it in my channel surfing.
yeah, no, that I always talk about. I talk about this movie a lot with Phil, especially recently because we've been doing this thing which we mentioned to Morgan, but it's called Movie Grid. It's kind of like the Wordle of movies. And Panic Room is a movie that as a
Mention it a
kid,
lot.
I randomly watched it and it just always stayed with me. I don't know why. It was just like a random Friday night, and me and Alex, my brother, we were just kind of sitting on the couch doing nothing. We're like, let's just flip channels. And we watched Panic Room and like, whoa, that was maybe it was, I feel like it was one of the first thriller movies I've ever seen. So I was just like, oh man, that was like really interesting. And then we watched Snakes on a Plane. And I was just like, oh,
Snakes on a
that's fun
Plane.
too.
What a film.
But going back to like Harold and Kumar, it was just a movie that I remember I just randomly saw on like Comedy Central. And I honestly think that's the biggest one I would say is related to this because it's a movie about really nothing. It's the ridiculousness of them going to White Castle, right? That's the whole point. And then
Yeah.
if I remember correctly, spoiler alert for that movie, they don't even enjoy it that much.
I don't think that they do. No, they're just like, eh.
Which is like the nice punchline of that movie. But yeah, no, this is just a very fascinating movie, and that's why I kind of wish we had Amy on here because I don't necessarily even think it's a horror movie. I don't think it's very scary.
No.
Like I don't even know what you consider it, and I think that's fun. And I miss, and I guess the question is, do you guys feel like movies like this exist anymore? Because I think even the ridiculous ones, because I think Megan's a good example of it. Megan's kind of a little ridiculous, but it's ridiculous in a way that's manufactured. It's crafted. Like it's TikTok, you know?
I definitely agree. You know, I've been watching a lot of Chucky in the last week because I've fallen down the hole again, and I find myself thinking this quite a lot that we don't really get movies like this anymore. Like that, every movie feels very, like you said, manufactured. It's meant for the mass appeal, and you don't really see like the experimental, like
The movie 43s.
the movie 43. It's not that I want to see a movie 43, but you know, Seed of Chucky, the one that follows this, is widely regarded as the worst movie in the franchise, and it's weird. Like if you thought this was weird, Seed is even weirder. Like there's a lot going on in that movie, but I miss movies like that were allowed to be weird and still get like a wide release, and people would see it and talk about it.
Yeah, Megan felt like it was I don't know, like very scaled down version of like kind of one of these movies, where this movie felt like it started where Megan was, and then they just kept on going, and what if we made it weirder? And what if we made it weirder? And what if we made it weirder? Like I feel like that like nowadays would get watered down to like people aren't gonna want to see the dolls have sex. Like don't
But
put
we
that
do.
We do.
people are going to be awful, like, thrown off if you have the dolls do this weird thing or that weird thing, or randomly flip off a guy in a parking lot. Don't leave that scene in. But like this movie was just like, nah, I'm going to put it in. I like it.
I think a good example of actually one movie, and obviously this is not a bad movie. This is actually, I think, a brilliant movie and a good movie. I know Morgan hasn't seen it yet, but Bottoms is the last movie I feel like was able to be loose and be able to do its thing. Because the director and the writer is friends with Rachel Sennett, who was one of the stars of the movie, and she also wrote the movie. They wrote it together, and you could tell that the whole movie was improv. The whole movie was improv, where they could do anything and say anything, and obviously they did it in a good way. It was not a bad movie, but it's like, oh, it allowed itself to be ridiculous, and that's why it's such a fun time with that movie.
And I think that I love Bottoms, one of my favorite movies of the year, and like I think it's because it wasn't worried about mass appeal.
No,
it got to be as weird as it is, because I love Bottoms, and I don't tell everybody I know to watch it because I know it's not for everybody. But I tell I tell a lot of people to watch it because the people that it's for are gonna fucking love it. Like,
and we went out of our way to see it. You know, when I remember I wanted to see it just because it was queer, but also like Fight Club. That's so interesting. But well, like also like it just looks so fun. So we're like, oh, let's go to for us, we went like a little like we went to New Jersey and saw it, and it was so worth it. And I think then a few weeks after it actually did go to more theaters, which I was happy about. It got some buzz, but not enough buzz, which is like kind of sad.
I hear it's really good, but
I hope it becomes a cult classic because it's just so fun. I don't remember the last time I was literally crying from laughing a whole movie.
Everyone was in the theater. What were you saying, Morgan?
Oh, I said that I heard it was really good, but it was one of those things. I think that was one of those things where like I didn't get out to see it right away, and then it felt like it just like disappeared immediately.
Mm-hmm.
It was in theater. I remember the week it came out, we were busy and we were just like, we have to see this movie or else it will not be around anymore. I think one of Phil's siblings was gonna go with us, but we kind of ditched them because it's just like we won't be able to see it. And we're like, you have to come later and we'll see it with you after because we were like, we got to see it now or else it's not gonna be in theaters. And that was the last movie we saw, so that's where we're at. But yeah, I miss I like movies like that, and I'm kind of like on the hunt for a good comedy. I remember when Joyrides came out, and which is weird that we're talking about Bride of Chucky, and it's it is a horror franchise, but I do.
And but it's comedies, yeah.
And I'm kind of like again on a hunt for it, and I actually almost have a soft spot for a comedy. Where like Joyride, I thought was a decent movie, but it wasn't like, wow, it was the best movie ever. But it's still in my top 10 of the year because it just was so different from anything else I saw. And honestly, and we've talked about this in previous podcasts, horror has really kind of too much space in theaters, I would say. And this is coming from us who love seeing every horror movie. But every single time you go to the movies, there's a horror movie, and that's it. It's just like, I just want to see. I always talk about this movie Causeway with Jennifer Lawrence, where it's just like sometimes I just want to see a girl skimming a pool and talking about her life because of the pool. And I'm just like, I love movies like that. I was showing for my birthday, one of my birthday wishes to watch trailers of movies that I like, and then Phil's like, "Why don't we just watch the movie?" I'm like, "I just want to watch the trailer.
I just want a little taste."
And
no, it's not my favorite activity of your birthday.
One of my favorite activities of my birthday. It was so funny. But one of the movies that I made them watch the trailer was this movie called The Novice, and it's this girl who just wants to be the best rower. And then Dan was just like, so that's the arc, is that like she's always been a good rower her whole life. Like, no, you don't get it. Her arc is that this is the first time she's ever rowed, and she wants to be the best rower in the world. And she's only rowed once. And like, that's such a good character story. Why can't that be released in theaters? I'm sure I'm the only one who's seen The Novice in the world.
I believe that.
That might be true.
I don't think it had a wide release. But my point being is like, I want to see movies like that again. I want to, like, I was even just looking at like what movies are coming out now. I'm like, all right, cool. Saw's out for some, Barbie, I guess, is somehow still out. Like, I just want to see like that unique movie that just they allow to be in theaters and we get to see it. And maybe it's a comedy, maybe it's and I think what's so interesting when I thought Bride of Chucky came out on DVD, because it kind of lives on, it feels like a DVD movie, but it came out in the right time where it could have just been released in theaters.
We need more Brides of Chucky theatrical releases.
I feel like nowadays this would be like a straight to streaming movie.
Yeah,
I don't think they would take a big theatrical risk with Bride of Chucky. But back then, in the golden era of the late '90s, you could actually get it into theaters.
And the problem with
go ahead.
I was just gonna say the problem with the streaming is that like everyone misses it because it's just so many streaming services. No one knows what's actually out. But we're gonna say.
I was gonna say there are direct-to-video Chucky movies. The last two movies in the franchise, Curse and Cult of Chucky, are direct-to-video. And you know what's funny is that I actually think they're safer theatrical releases than Bride or Seed. It's just after Seed, no one really wanted to take a risk on Chucky until it came back into favor again with the TV stuff. So,
and the TV show is such an interesting beast in that regard because it's like sci-fi, a channel like. Is anyone watching sci-fi right now? What else is on there?
It's so funny because when Mike was like, "Oh, how many Chucky things are there?" and I was like, "Oh, I think that there's a Chucky TV show that I've heard is really good. Like people like it." He's like, "Oh, what channel is that on?" I was like, "Sci-fi." He said, "Is Sci-fi still a channel?"
I know.
I
haven't watched anything on Sci-Fi aside for Chucky in probably 7 years.
I know.
We watched Winona Earp, and I think that was the last thing I watched on Sci-Fi.
That's true. That's true.
It's funny.
Mike said I didn't finish it either, and I've been meaning to for ages, but one of these days. Mike said, like,
Black all over again.
Yeah, he basically said, like, everything, like, the sci-fi is really in now, and somehow the channel has still not, like, it feels like the channel has gotten worse, I don't hear of anything being on Sci-Fi anymore, and you can find sci-fi stuff, like, kind of everywhere now, where it's, like, it felt like they missed their moment to be like, we've been talking about this the whole time. They just let everybody else take their stuff.
I think they stole the name. It's like having, like, I don't know, having the name bookmark.com, and then you're just, like, don't actually really good at selling bookmarks, but you just have the domain. Yeah. And you're like, why do you have to have the domain? I feel like I could be a better bookmark seller, but you still have the domain.
I love that you went bookmark.
I couldn't think of anything. All the domain.
Is there a bookmark right off camera that you're looking
at? That'd be amazing.
I was looking at, honestly, no, I was looking at our books, so maybe that's what happened. I'm gonna look up bookmark.com now. Okay, bookmark.com. Spend time running your business, not your website. It actually doesn't even sell bookmarks.
Wow, it's
so sad.
It's a prophecy that you just you spoke into the world.
I really did, because they don't even sell bookmarks. They sell, it's AI actually.
Oh my God, so sad. What a depressing.
What a depressing turn of events is that bookmark is the most physical thing you could think of in life, because it's about reading physical books and saving your spot, and then it's a website about AI.
That feels right for the times. It feels right for the end times that we live in.
It definitely feels right.
Phil, how many movies are there in the Chucky universe? The universe of Chucky films.
There are 7 movies, and then the reboot, so 8 movies technically.
Okay.
7 in the canon, and then there's the TV show that's just started its 3rd season. So there's there's probably a solid 30 to 40 hours of Chucky content out there to consume.
That is amazing. Great, good for Chucky. I was like, okay, so 7 movies. I'm 2 in.
I know that you like getting into weird things, and I think Chucky is very rewarding for that reason. I think you watch the second movie and you're like, oh, that's fun. And then you realize that the girl character from this movie comes back 6 movies later and 20 years later. And you're like, oh, that's the kind of thing that I like. So
that's so funny.
Phil watches the show The Fosters because he loves continuity so much. He watches Good Trouble.
I think I'm the only person on the planet watching Good Trouble.
I used to see the previews for that because I watched what was the show with they all worked at like a fashion magazine.
Oh my God, what's it called?
And now I can't remember
the
Bold Type.
The Bold Type. Yeah.
I used to love that show.
I had the reverse. I would always get previews of the Bold Type.
I would see
Good Trouble.
I would see the previews for Good Trouble, and I'd be like, "What are they up to?"
I just watched that cancer show and see the previews of all of them.
I remember watching a little bit of that too.
Life, I think it was called.
If there was something on Freeform, I was like, "Fine, give it to me."
We watched that mermaid show for a hot second.
Did you really?
Show. Yeah, I watched. I think you were in a press room for that, so you had to watch at least one episode.
Oh yeah, I think I watched.
I feel like you watched it. You did it because you had like an assignment. I don't think you watched the show.
I might have watched the pilot for the press room, but I don't think I watched any more of it.
No, I only watched the pilot too, and it was an interesting show. I'm sure our audience knows a lot of these shows.
These are really hot topics with our audience.
If you don't know what the mermaid show
that is, one mermaid show on Freeform 5 years ago.
And they'll tell us what the title of the show was. I'm sure whatever is on besides Good Trouble. I don't even know what's on Freeform anymore. I think Grownish is on it. Is that what it's called? It's called Grownish. Yeah. Okay. So that sounds right, but that also sounds so wrong. Okay. So let's ask the burning question of, well, Phil, you already have seen Chucky, so I don't think you're gonna stop now. I don't think this movie is like, oh, it's actually I'm done. I watched.
I've got everything I want.
It's like I think I'm done. I don't want to see any more Chucky. But Morgan, you've invested now. You are 2 movies in.
I'm 2 movies in. So
where are you going?
I have to ask myself, if I watch another Chucky movie, do I go back and watch Child's Play 2? Because I've watched 1 and 4, which is kind of a weird kind of a weird one. So do I go back and watch Child's Play 2, or do I go forward and watch what apparently is one of the weirder ones, Seed of Chucky?
Yeah. I'll say if you go right to Seed, be prepared for a lot of doll sperm. And
no.
And just know you're watching something really weird.
Just be prepared for whatever's
but
gonna happen.
They are a main character in the show.
That's true. The Seed of Chucky, Glenn, is a main character in the second season of the show. So I would say I think the show is new watcher friendly in one regard, where it like eases you into all of the lore. Like it starts off with its own self-contained story, and it takes like 5 or 6 episodes before you start throwing like your Tiffany's in and your characters from the movies. And I think they do a good job of like kind of bringing you up to speed on who they are. But it's definitely rewarding if you've seen the movies, because it's just this culmination of 25 years of continuous storytelling. So
that's your answer. Watch the show.
Just skip to the show.
Skip to the show. You don't need to be rewarded. You could just be like, oh yeah, I guess that's an important character.
Cool.
You know what's so funny? I during my birthday extravaganza, I have a thing where I like watching something from the beginning and skipping the middle and going all the way to the end. So I was like,
Cat is a monster.
It's my absolute nightmare.
I was trying to squeeze in a lot of things that I know I couldn't get on another day besides my birthday. So I was like, let's watch this hour-long lecture about living life, which is by Randy Pouch, The Last Lecture, which is one of my favorite things in the world. But I said, I'm not going to let you guys sit through an hour. Let's watch the first 5 minutes. And this is after I've shown 2 hours of stuff. Like I've been showing them like a scene of Watchmen. I showed them the scene from season 2 of The Bear. Like I've been showing them all these random stuff.
Here's the thing about Kat. She doesn't plan when she shows something. So at least with The Bear and Watchmen, not even there, but like she knew the scene she wanted to show. So like The Bear, it was like it was a monologue, it was good. Watchmen, it took her a minute to find what she wanted, but when she showed it, it was good. With this Randy Pouch lecture, she was like, I want to show you, but I'm just going to show you the first 5 minutes and the end. And it was so unsatisfying because you could tell this is a really great lecture, but you missed all of the build up in the middle, and we just got like this punch at the end, and all of us were just so frustrated.
I'm showing them the first 5 minutes. I'm getting into it, and then I do skip to the end. I was like, but which part do I go to? And they're like, you see that spike? Go to that.
The
and
most watched part, because YouTube tells you the most watched.
Yeah, and so I'm like, all right, let's go there. And then I hear from the side of me, Marianne sitting next to me, and she's like, Kat, I hate you. Because I knew in my body that I showed them something that they wouldn't understand. That's okay. That's okay. So my answer to you, and really the whole culmination theme of this, is that you can watch the beginning of something and you can watch the end of something without watching the middle.
Without watching the important things in the middle that establish the
okay, wouldn't it have been better if you sat through an hour lecture? I don't know.
I think it would have. I'm, as you know, I'm a completionist. I watched Once Upon a Time all the way through. I watched all of the Fosters in Good Trouble. I watched all of Chucky. When I start something, I need to go from the beginning to the end. So I don't know how we're friends.
That's me too. I'm a completionist too. When people are like, "Oh, just start in the middle," I'm like, I don't know that I can do that.
Oh, I definitely can.
Whenever I'm watching like Saw X, we were talking about seeing, I know for a fact that if we were seeing Saw X, I would go out of my way to see every Saw movie before it.
I think that's the reason why you're almost okay with us seeing it without you.
I am. I will watch Saw X at some point, but I am going to watch all the other ones. I've seen like 4 of them, so I don't have that.
I've seen 0, and I'm going to Saw X.
Whoa, you haven't seen any yet, Kat?
No,
not even the first one.
When Candyman came out, I made sure to watch all 3 of the ones that came.
And I did not watch any of them. And you know what? That was a mistake. I feel like I missed a lot because I didn't watch the other.
Yeah, Candyman. You at least needed to see that first one. The second 2, not at all. But
I remember being lost with that Candyman movie. But yeah, I've never seen the Saw movies because again, my friend Luke. He was a big horror expert, and I don't think he was a big fan of Saw, so he didn't really show to us when we were kids, and I never went. Because he would always say it was bad, so I just didn't like go to it. So I was just like,
to be fair, I also haven't seen a Saw movie, but I am squeamish when it comes to gore. And those movies are only about that. Like in a Chucky movie, I can like find out when the gory parts are going to be and just like do this for like 2 seconds. And then I'm like, okay, back to the road trip. But like in a Saw, that's the whole purpose of the movie. That's the whole movie. You're just doing this the whole time.
Don't watch Hostel, Morgan.
I couldn't do it. I wouldn't survive.
I think Hostel is like Saw, but like even more disgusting.
I've read just like reviews that mention stuff that happens in those movies where I start having to fan myself.
I'm
like,
not squeamish, and like that one makes me like, oh my god. Like Saw, I can watch without looking away. Like I think Saw is gory. But I think the reputation precedes it a little bit. But a Hostel, I was like, oh, that's what people must think when they think of Saw.
I know the Human Centipede's supposed to be really weird
and
gory, and I heard Raw.
I did see Raw.
I heard that one people threw up at.
It was gross, but I didn't. It's not gonna make me throw up. I also didn't love the movie, so I don't have the strongest impression of it.
I want to watch more horror movies during this time period. So maybe I'll watch Saw because I've never seen it. But I feel like
maybe at least the original. I've heard that the original. I feel like the original now is probably tame, like in terms of like the gore level
of gore. That's usually, again, the only type of movies I don't really like, and it's not because I'm scared of them. Is the demon movies. I remember we watched Evil Dead, and I was just like, I was trying to be nice to Phil, I was just like, you know what, we always recommend stuff to watch. You've been asking for this a long time. Let's watch it.
I know Kat doesn't like possession movies, and Evil Dead is a franchise that it's like about demons, but like it's not a demon movie. Like it's like kind of the midway point between like a demon movie and like an action movie, and even a little bit of taste of a zombie movie. It just so happens that the one I hadn't seen yet that I wanted to watch was the most traditional demon movie, and I wasn't prepared for that when I made Kat watch it.
I just get so bored, man. I just get like, when I see a demon, I know they're gonna explain why that demon's there. I just don't care.
That's why
I can't have your backstory.
Are so good. They don't waste their time. They're just like, yeah, there's demons. We're gonna have fun.
That's why I didn't hate Evil Dead as much. They didn't explain it as much, but they did try. They tried building a mythos. They tried making people being possessed.
And you don't like that?
I don't like that.
Don't give me world building. Get out of here with that.
I always tell Kat that as someone who hates the demon movie genre, she should really watch the best movie in the genre, The Exorcist. But she's like, I'm not doing it.
The new one's coming out, and I don't think I will watch it.
I'll see what the reviews are.
I feel like the reviews have started to trickle out for the new one, and it's
not good.
Bad.
Okay, but maybe that's good.
The Exorcist is one that like traumatized me as a child. So like
Matilda was that for me.
Wait, Matilda?
Yeah, I got sick once watching it, and I was really sick, and I was dizzy. And that girl kept floating popcorn places, and then people were yelling, and then the room was spinning, and Matilda, to this day, just makes me nauseous.
What's the scariest movie to Morgan? The Exorcist. What's the scariest movie to Kat? Matilda.
Every time I talk to Kat, I learn something new. And
you didn't know about Matilda?
I didn't know how Matilda.
Kat is an onion. We're just peeling back the layers.
You know what's funny is that Julius and I, before we went on here, we were just like scrolling, looking for something to watch, and we passed Matilda. And I was like, we should watch Matilda.
Don't watch Matilda in front of me. I will throw up. I just remember I also had to like go to a tutor of some sort like that day, and I was in this hot room, and then my mom's like, "You still got to go." I'm like, I have to throw up. And I'm watching Matilda, and she just passed jelly beans to her friend. And then that son, it's just too much, man. And I don't even like, I see the play, the musical, I'm like, get it away from me. There's not one movie that'll make that. And that movie from Disney Channel, Read It or Weep.
I've never even heard of that.
That's the sisters, right? Kay
and
Baker.
Yeah. I was so sick that day when I watched that movie. I remember I was sleeping, and I was like half watching it, and that movie would not stop playing because Disney Channel, when they have an original movie, they'll premiere it all night because they're like, someone missed it. So I was so sick I couldn't find the remote, and I was just thinking, and one of these girls played basketball in the movie, and I kept seeing lines of basketball in my head, and I was just like so nauseous. I was just so sick. And they kept talking, and then the end they talked about seaweed pizza. I'm like, get away from me.
Wait, is this one of this? Is this the girl from The Flash?
Yes, she's in it.
Yeah.
I had to Google it to be like, what
Her
is
and her
this
sister
traumatized movie?
are the stars of that one.
In this movie, one of them plays basketball, and one of them I want to say works at a pizza shop. And they kept someone's
a fictional character.
No way.
Yeah, one of them's a writer, and the Danielle Kay Panabaker's a writer. And
who's getting seaweed pizza?
Her dad owns a pizza shop, and they have the seaweed pizza.
I knew the pizza was involved.
Danielle Panabaker's her character, like the bolder version of her, who actually ends up being the villain of the movie somehow.
That's so.
How do you remember so much about this movie?
As we've established, I have a pretty good movie with memory when it comes to media, and you have a pretty good movie memory when it comes to people.
That's true. That is true. But yeah, that's our horror movie Bride of Chucky reviews.
We need the crossover between Matilda and Chucky. You know, this is a quick tangent. There's a Friday the 13th movie where they wanted to do Carrie versus Jason, but they didn't get the rights to Carrie.
Funny.
So they just had this random telekinetic girl. This is like the fifth, the sixth, or seventh movie, and I think we need more random ass shit like that.
I agree. Movies that didn't work out.
I miss like the Freddy versus Jason time of our lives, where you would just hear about a movie that was coming out and you'd think, what? I feel like there needs to be like a Chucky versus Megan versus Annabelle movie.
Ooh.
Right?
I want to go to the theater. This is what I want to do. I want to go to the theater one day, and I didn't see any trailer on social media and see something like that, where it's just like, wow. Like, I want to be surprised in that way. Like, you actually go to the theater, and the trailer's not. You have to go to the theater to see this trailer, to see it's real. They won't release it on the internet, which is like, maybe the most brilliant marketing and the worst marketing all at the same time. Oh, that's a good example. Another tangent. Barb and Star is a movie that is that. So we went to go see. Do you remember what movie we saw when we saw that trailer? Because I do not.
I don't remember, but the movie in question, Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar, was a comedy that nobody saw.
Oh, yeah.
But Kat and I were in a movie theater. We saw a trailer for it, and we were like, "That's a funny trailer." And then COVID happened, and theaters shut down, and this trailer was not released online. And I spent literally a year trying to find this. Every couple of months.
First of all, figuring out what the name of the movie was.
No, I didn't even know the name of the movie. I just knew Kristen Wiig was in it. And I would try to find it. And I found a Reddit post of other people doing the same thing. They were like, I found the movie's name because of that. And they're like, does anyone know where the Barb and Star trailer is? And then they put the movie on the shelf because of the pandemic. And then eventually, like a year later, they finally re-released the trailer. We were like, it's real. It wasn't like a fever dream. We all got together.
Something we all experienced.
We did watch the movie. I don't think it was in theaters, and that was one of the longest movie experiences we ever had. We watched that movie for 7 hours, and I'm not joking. We watched that movie for 7 hours.
We were in a really chatty mood that day, so we kept pausing it. Sometimes to talk about the movie, sometimes to talk about something completely unrelated. I really liked the movie. I've seen it like 2 times since then. I think Kat just thought it was okay. But
yeah, I did not that movie, but it's just okay. It's an experience. I want that, but like a real trailer where it's like they never release it, and it's like a fever dream. It's like, did you see Megan?
They just released the trailer, but they never released the movie, so that it becomes like a Berenstein Bears thing where everybody thinks that they saw the movie. What's it called? Like, the Mandela effect or something like that.
Didn't they release that movie eventually? They actually did, because I remember I went to Comic-Con and they were talking about that bear movie.
Kat, you're making things up.
Which bear movie?
I don't like you guys.
Those are little books. Those are little books, and everybody thought they were called the Bernstein Bears or something like that.
No, they made it. They made a movie of it.
Or something. No, I don't think they did.
I don't think I've heard that.
This is like an actual example of this effect in
I'm Googling it, and I don't see any movie results, Kat. I think you're making shit up.
Are you thinking about Cocaine Bear?
No, you can watch it. Look, watch now. The Bernstein. There's something about it.
All right, but are you talking about the 1983 movie?
I remember I went to Comic-Con.
There's an animated series about it. I don't know.
So interesting. First of all, I have seen that animated series. Yeah, maybe there's another bear movie, but there's this bear movie.
There is all I'm finding is like TV movies from the 80s and 90s and 70s.
I think it has to be. I think I went to that panel.
You were in an alternate universe where they were.
You were in that
alternate universe.
I don't think it was, Kat. I don't think it was in Hall H.
No.
Kat, were you asleep?
No, this happened like 2 years ago. It's a bear movie.
You're wrong, girl.
It's a bear movie. Could you imagine if it's like Game of Thrones and then like they leave and it's like, all right, get hype for the Berenstein Bears.
They got Hall H.
Everybody starts screaming in Hall H. They're so excited.
They start breaking out in fights of whether it's the Berenstein or the Bears.
Yes, exactly. It's chaos.
Oh man, I hope that someone was at Hall H when they saw this bear. Like, please, guys, let me know. I know it existed.
I always love coming on here because we always start talking about something and then end up in a place that is unfathomable.
We're gonna like, we start with Bride of Chucky, we end somehow talking about like Paddington Bear 3 or something.
Yeah, and I'm sure that there's some like genius out there who can like chart a logic tree of how we got here.
Oh yeah, I think they
hard.
will.
It's like this.
Tell me what the bear movie is. I know they went camping. There was something about it, man. It wasn't Cocaine Bear either. It was something.
Are you sure?
I'm sure.
I would even have a hard time though imagining Cocaine Bear being in Hall H. Like, is that how tough it was that year?
I feel like it was the year. It was last year. Whatever it was. One day I'm gonna look up Hall H panels. It was weird. It was weird. It was
Keep
a movie, though.
When you figure it out.
It was a movie.
In a month from now, Phil, Kat's gonna just like tag us on Twitter and be like, "I found it."
I feel like Cocaine Bear, since we're talking about it, is kind of like the weird movie we were talking about, but it wasn't weird enough. I think we left the movie thinking that should have been weirder. So
no, I remember being actually a little underwhelmed. I was. I
had
was
really good kills, but it wasn't goofy enough.
No, it wasn't goofy enough. Well, I hope so. Ooh, directors on directing. That's not gonna be it. Bear. Maybe you know what? Maybe I just saw a Hall H of the Bear. You know, of the TV show The Bear.
Of the TV show The Bear.
And you really filled in the dots after that one.
And I really filled it in. It's like it's about a bear. Like yeah, guys, I love our tangents, and I enjoy talking about Bride of Chucky. Maybe next year we'll do another weird movie that Phil will recommend us. Maybe we'll do Freddy vs. Jason.
I think Freddy versus Jason is interesting to talk about because everything with Freddy and Jason is great and everything without them is unbearable. And
or we can talk about Jason X the space one.
Oh yeah, he does go to space at one point.
That's such a funny movie. It's a funny movie. I miss movies like that. Send Chucky to space. He's in the Oval Office now. They're doing weird.
He's president? Question
mark. He's with the president's son. I'm sure he'll be president by the end of the season.
The president's son?
Yeah, this president's son has Chucky as a doll. And
amazing. When I saw the Oval Office in the preview image, I was like, what is happening on this show?
They have fun.
I saw Chucky was trending, and I was just like, and their promotion was a lot about America.
I think movies are afraid to do weird stuff. Like, I think Scream, it's so funny that we got Scream 6 this year, and it felt like it was a big deal that they just changed the setting to New York. Like, that's how it was
good too.
Yeah, it was a good movie, but that's how starved we are for shaking the status quo. They have such big investments in these movies. They're afraid to do something weird anymore. Like,
and that's why we hated Scream 5 because they did it so to the book that I was like, wow, this is boring. And then Scream 6, they did different enough. Like, it's still a Scream movie, but like it was a good movie. I kind of wish it didn't come out so early in the year because I feel like I don't remember it as well.
I missed it when it came out.
I recommend
it, especially for,
but I'm gonna watch it now, the spooky season, because when we missed it in theaters, I was like, whatever, we'll just wait until October and watch it. Like that's when I'm gonna want to watch it anyway. Weird that it came out when it did, honestly.
It was January, I want to say. It was a really bad release.
I feel like sometimes really they just drop some horror movies that I feel like they're not that excited about in January.
I remember. For some reason, I don't really get hyped about movies anymore. I just kind of go see them.
For some reason, hyped.
I was hyped for this movie. I just had like this gut feel. I love Scream.
That and Little Mermaid. Really
I was interested in Little Mermaid for sure, but Scream, I was actually like, I hope this is really good, which is weird because I didn't like Scream 5 and it was the same team. And Kat was like, "Oh, I hope you're right, but it's a January release. It's gonna be bad." And it was good. It's still in my top 5 of the year. So
yeah, mine too. I think we do our like top 10 movies of the year. We do our little letterbox thing. But speaking of, we are going to be doing a top 5 horror movie. So for you guys will be it might have actually already been released, but we're recording it next. But let's go around the table and see what's coming up for everybody and plug stuff. So Phil, you are a guest. Coming up for me is coming up for you, but why don't you plug them?
Cool. I don't know when this is coming out, but we always have Kickstarters live, so you can always check out our books. I got a horror book right now, Haunting, that I'm sure will be done by the time this goes up. But
it's not about dolls. But go get the trade. Go catch up with the book.
That's true. You can still get the book. You can find me on Twitter at Phil Falco Writes, and you can find everything I do right there. And I'm sure you'll see me collaborating with Kat all the time.
Yeah. Go check out all Phil's stuff, because most of it is also my stuff.
Support all of it.
Support all of it, but definitely go check out Haunting if you do like horror stuff. Because I think if you're a Chucky fan, I feel like you might like Bram. I think Bram's a little brat.
My favorite horror has like a good sense of humor, so I try to do the same with my horror book. So
definitely have a sense of humor. Go check it out. For me, at Comic Uno, same stuff. Kickstarter, go check all that stuff out. Yeah, how about you, Morgan?
I'm at Mojotastic on Twitter and Instagram, and you can find me as a co-host on Supergirl Radio, where we were supposed to this week talk about the superpowered DC documentary on HBO Max / just Max, I guess now. But then my computer decided to die. So there's a fun like technical difficulty episode out there on the feed, but next week we will, or whenever this came out, maybe we already talked about it, but we will be talking about that DC documentary.
And we should mention the reason why we say whenever this comes out is that we like to double record a lot.
That's
and
true.
You should check out our Patreon, where you could kind of be part of the conversation and you could get your comments up here. We have 2 people actually watching now. And it's fun because you might get episodes way in advance because you are part of the Patreon. You'll get like special episodes too. I think we'll probably talk about Morgan's Italy trip. But we're waiting for Amy.
There's drama.
There was drama. There was drama. So if you want to know, become a Patreon supporter, and that's patreon.com/thelegendaryladies. But yeah, we release extra content, and if you're a Patreon supporter, you'll get content early, sometimes a week or 2 early, and you can always join us in the live chats and chat along while we record.
You could tell me what that bear movie is in the chat.
if you knew, you could have been telling us right now. Somebody knows what she's talking about, is like screaming in the car, like, no, I know.
And it wasn't the Country Bears, I swear.
The Jamboree? Was it the Jamboree, Cat?
Yes, it was the Country Bears Jamboree. Believe it or not, seeing the movie, you shouldn't see it.
Wait, is there a movie? There's a Country Bears. Oh, yes. I was completely kidding.
No, there is a Country Bear movie. It's in the same zeitgeist as Dr. Dolittle.
Oh no!
Talking animals, doing live action things.
Oh boy.
And one of my favorite movies of all time is Dr. Dolittle 3. So watch out. Matilda's the scariest. The best is Dr. Dolittle
3. You've heard it right here, folks.
All right, guys, and stay legendary.